The last lecture of the facets for this year. So today we have Meena, Meena Mahajan. She's a professor at IMSC. She's going to be talking about determining if two bit strings are identical. So over to you, Meena.
Thanks, Varuni. Um, and it's a pleasure to be talking here at Facets. It would have been even nicer if we could have had this face-to-face at IMSC, but short of that, this is the next best thing. And I hope that as I go along in the talk, if anything is not clear, you will just feel free to interrupt at any point and get it clarified. So that will give a more interactive feel to this talk. Okay. So let's get to the topic: determining if two bit strings are identical. When this, on the face of it, this seems like an obvious, a rather simple task to do. So here, let me show you what I mean by the question. So, so maybe you have two bit strings like this. This thing on the left is, although it is written across several lines, it is just one long bit string. Here's one bit string, which potentially could be even longer. Here's another bit string on the right, which is very long, and you have to decide, are they identical? Now, obviously, it's not a difficult task, but it's a tedious task. You'll have to really look at every bit very carefully and figure out. So in this case, I can quickly tell you the answer. If you look at these things which are highlighted in red, here is a bit which is 1, and in the corresponding place here you have a 0. Similarly, here there is a bit which is 0, and in the corresponding place here you have a 1. So these two bit strings are not identical. What I would like to ask you to do at this point is to stop for a moment and think about how would you figure out such a thing. So in general, two bit strings are given, and the reason why I'm looking at bit strings and not just sequences of digits or letters or so on is that we are in the digital world, and files stored on our computers are stored in a digital format where there are bits, 0, 1. So this is the typical kind of encoding that is being used in almost all our everyday applications. In particular, you can think of two files, one on the cloud somewhere and one on your desktop, and somebody is trying to figure out whether these two files are the same or do you need to update one of them. So, well, you need to do a bit by bit check, it seems like, but maybe we want to ask a more nuanced question here. So this is the equality problem. We have two bit strings, X, Y. So they are over this alphabet 0, 1, they are n bits long. We want to decide whether they are exactly the same. So we can define this equality function. The equality function parameterized by n, it takes two arguments. The first argument is a bit string of length n, the second argument is a bit string of length n, and it returns a function value. The function value is either 0 or 1. 1 means the arguments are equal, 0 means they are not equal. Okay, so this is the equality function. The equality function is actually, if you think of it, it's a family of functions, one for each n. Okay, and this is the typical thing that we will look at in this setting. You have families of functions parameterized by the length. So equality of two strings of the same length. We are assuming that they are of the same length, and now we want to check whether they are equal. So the problem which we are considering is one in which these two bit strings are located physically perhaps very far apart, and in fact they are probably owned by, if you think of X and Y as two digital files, then they are owned by two people who are located far apart, whose computers are far away, and communication between them is very expensive. In fact, let's even get rid of the middlemen and the middlewomen. There are no people involved. Maybe one computer is on the International Space Station and one is on a marine research center somewhere in the Antarctica, and transmitting stuff back and forth between these two is not a cheap thing. So really the software that we will write, which is going to check whether two files are the same, will want to transmit as little as possible. If there is a charge on transmission per bit, then you want to minimize that charge somehow. At the same time, you do want to answer this question. So the question which we want to answer is not deciding what is the value of equality, which we know how to do by checking things bit by bit. The question which we want to answer is, how many bits of communication are sufficient in order to decide this question? And even more interesting, how many bits are really necessary? The two files are n bits long each. How many bits are sufficient? How many bits are necessary? We would like to answer both these questions and see whether they match up. Whether we know how to solve this problem with the equality problem with using exactly the amount of bits that are known to be necessary. So is there a gap between necessary and sufficient is the question which we want to address. So here is one of the most simple communication protocols one can think about this. There are these, I said, let's eliminate the middle persons. And now I have brought back two names, Alice and Bob, very angelicized names, but these are the names which are standard used in this literature. So this is the communication setup. There are these two parties which are typically called Alice and Bob. You may think of some other names if you prefer. These two parties, Alice and Bob, need not be people. As I said, they could be computers in some remote locations, and each one of them has one of these files. Now on the header of this slide, I have this word protocol. So what do I mean by protocol? Now, so I'm a computer scientist, and computer scientists very often talk about software, about algorithms. I'm not talking about an algorithm here. I'm not talking about an algorithm to solve this problem. So what is the difference between an algorithm and a protocol? An algorithm is trying to compute something. So it has all the input, the data that it needs, and it is looking at it and figuring out the answer. Here, the data is not available in one place. So really the thing that needs to be figured out is who talks when, who sends information to the other party when, what information does this party send, and how does it allow them to conclude what is the answer. So it's a in that sense, it is a protocol. The protocol will a protocol is like a set of conventions, right? So the protocol will specify, okay, Alice is the person who speaks first. So the computer which is at the space station is the one which first sends a bit across. Then the protocol may specify that, okay, if the first bit which is sent is a 0, then the next bit is going to come from Bob. And if the first bit which comes is a 1, then the next bit will also come from Alice. Alice has something more to say. So the protocol is going to lay down these rules completely unambiguously. Who says what when? Okay, all these things have to be clearly specified. Now the important thing is who says what. If it is Alice's turn to speak according to this protocol, to send a bit, then the bit that she sends can depend on her input X. It can also depend on the bits which have already been transmitted till now. So Bob, maybe this is at some later stage in the protocol and Bob has sent some information. Alice can take that into account in deciding whether the next bit should be 0 or 1. But what Alice sends cannot depend on all of Y because she does not know the string Y. Y is sitting with Bob, and all that she knows about Y is the bits that Bob has sent to her earlier on in the protocol. So at each stage of the protocol has to specify what function Alice and Bob will apply to decide what is the next bit to send. Now this looks like a very complicated setup. We are trying to solve a very, very simple problem, equality. So let's just jump in and look at a simple protocol. This is a completely naive, straightforward protocol. Alice sends Bob all the bits of X. The protocol says first bit comes from Alice, second bit comes from Alice, third bit comes from Alice, blah, 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 up to N. Nth bit comes from Alice. So the first N bits, Alice sends everything in her input to Bob. At this point, Bob has not yet sent anything, but he has all the information required in order to decide the value of the equality function. He can check. So he can check these two files XY bit by bit, figure out whether they are equal or no, and then announce the value. So announcing whether they are equal or no is announcing a 0 or a 1. Remember we said that equality is a function. 1 means they are equal, 0 means they are not equal. So Bob announces the value. How much communication has happened in this protocol? N plus 1 bits. Alice sends N bits and Bob sends 1 bit. In fact, the last bit which is communicated is the function value. So if we don't count that, we only count how many bits are communicated until the point where one of the two parties is in a position to say, hey, I know the answer. Okay. So then in that case, this simple protocol communicates N bits. And N bits is like saying, the entire file has been sent. We have not done anything clever at all. So there is such a protocol which can send N bits and then the answer is known to one party. The question is, can we do better? So maybe stop for a moment and try and think. What do you think would be the best possible protocol that we could design for this problem? If I want to decide equality of two N-bit files, which are located far away, do you think that roughly N bits will have to be sent back and forth? It need not be that all the N bits are from Alice to Bob. Maybe Alice sends the first 2 bits and then Bob sends the next 2 bits. They may interleave in some way. But overall, accounting for both directions, do you think that roughly N bits need to be sent? Or do you think we can do with maybe something like square root N bits, but not much better than that? Or if you're really optimistic, you can even hope that, log n bits. Even square root n is too large. Maybe log n bits is enough. So this can do with, meaning I mean that, this is sufficient and this is also necessary. This is sufficient. This is all not also necessary. Or you can ask, is it possible to do this with just 2 bits or 4 bits or something? So like I said, if we were actually in a class, I would have taken a vote at this point and asked who thinks what. I probably could take a vote here on Zoom, but let's get past that. Each one of you try to keep your answer in mind, and now let's go and see how the story unfolds. So the right answer to this question, what is the best protocol? The first answer is that there is no one answer. The right answer, it depends on many things. So I'm going to give you 2-3 different answers, but the first answer should match the intuition that most of you have had till now. And the first answer is that no savings are possible. If you want to compare 2 n-bit strings and decide whether they are equal, then n bits of communication is absolutely necessary. It does not matter in what direction this communication is happening. Is it from Alice to Bob, from Bob to Alice, some bits in this direction, some bits in that direction? Whatever is the direction in which the communication is happening, no matter how often it switches direction, n bits of communication is necessary. Like I said, I asked all of you to note down what your vote is. I hope many of you chose this as the answer, that n bits are really necessary. So now, let me push this a little bit more. If we think that n bits are really necessary, are we in a position to prove this? How can we actually formally prove that n bits are really necessary? So what do we mean when we say n bits are necessary? I mean that for every protocol, so I'm going to use this capital pi as a letter to denote a protocol. So remember what I said, a protocol is just a set of rules which specifies who speaks what and when. Okay? So for every protocol which solves equality, now notice that here equality does not have that parameter n, so this protocol should solve equality no matter what the lengths of the inputs. For every such protocol, for every n greater than or equal to 1, there are bit strings of length n, x and y, where when Alice has x and Bob has y, this protocol pi communicates n bits. So this is what I mean when I say that no savings are possible. Maybe there are some bit strings for which this protocol communicates less than n bits, but there are at least one pair of inputs, x to Alice and y to Bob, where they require this full amount of communication. That's what I mean when I say that n bits are necessary. Okay? For every protocol, for every input length, there exists a worst case input for that length. How can we prove this? So of course I can jump in immediately and give you the proof, but maybe again, a minute or two to think about how would one go around establishing this in a completely rigorous formal way. So let's start off. We'll do this proof line by line, and hopefully you can see how it develops as we go along. It's not a very difficult proof. Okay, I want to say that it needs n bits of communication, which means that for every protocol, I may not even know what protocols are yet to be designed, so I cannot use any information about what the protocol must be doing. My lower bound argument cannot say that, okay, you have this protocol, it must have sent this first bit of this type. I don't know. A protocol has been given to me from somewhere. So fix an arbitrary protocol pi about which we know nothing, except for the fact that it solves the problem equality. Now let's try and reason somehow about this completely unknown protocol. For each input xy that this protocol has, there is what we can talk about as a transcript of communication. Okay? So the transcript of the communication is the bits that go back and forth. The bits. So imagine a third person. There is Alice in one place, there's Bob in another place, and Carol is sitting somewhere else and watching what are the bits going back and forth. Maybe she's also seeing the direction of the movement, but forget the direction. Just the bits. What are the bits which are appearing on this channel? That sequence of bits is the transcript. Okay? So I'm calling that tau. Tau on input xy is the transcript of communication when Alice has input x, Bob has input y, and they are following this protocol pi. So we want to show that for every n, there is an x and a y for which the length of tau xy is at least n. The length of the transcript is exactly the number of bits communicated, right? So the length of the transcript, let me indicate by this, tau xy in this modulus kind of signs. Okay, so suppose it is not the case. Suppose there is some n, some input length n, at which over all possible input strings of length n, the maximum transcript length is still less than n. It is at most n minus 1. Okay? So here the which n does not matter. Suppose there is even one n for which this happens. Okay? Now, like I said, I don't know anything else about the protocol other than the fact that it solves equality, and using that I'm going to come up with a contradiction like this. I'm going to define this function g, which maps an n-bit string x to the transcript which the protocol constructs when Alice has x and Bob also has x. That means when they have an input on which the equality function is 1. Okay, so g maps x to the transcript on xx. Now the pigeonhole principle tells us that this mapping cannot be injective. I hope you are aware of what the pigeonhole principle is. Let me quickly restate what it is. If you have k plus 1 pigeons and you have k holes, and you can think of these as live pigeons and pigeon cases, or you can think of a pigeonhole where you're storing mail, in an office or in a college where letters are being put into boxes. So if you have more pigeons than holes and you're going to put every pigeon into some hole or the other, then there must be at least one hole into which you have to put more than one pigeon. Right? So that's because there aren't enough holes to accommodate just one pigeon per hole. And stated in the language of functions, it's saying that this function g cannot be injective. You do not have enough different transcripts so that for each x I can choose a fresh transcript. The number of strings of length n is 2 raised to n. Right? There are n positions. At each position you can have a 0 or a 1. So you have 2 choices for position 1, 2 choices for position 2, and so on. So there are 2 raised to n possible values of x. And how many choices are there for a possible transcript? Even knowing nothing about pi, I can say that if the maximum transcript length is n minus 1, then the maximum possible number of transcripts is at most 2 raised to n minus 1. It's strictly less than 2 raised to n, and therefore this map is not injective. Okay, but so what? If that map is not injective, what more does it tell us? Let's continue with this proof. So if that map is not injective, what this tells us is that we can find 2-bit strings x and y, which are both of length n. They are different. X is not equal to y. But because the function was not injective, gx is equal to gy. And recall, what was g? Gx was the transcript when the inputs to this protocol were xx. Gy was the transcript when the inputs were yy. So when Alice has x and Bob has x, they produce a certain transcript. When Alice has y and Bob has y, they produce the same transcript. Okay? So that transcript, let's call it b1, b2 to bn minus 1. I stopped at n minus 1 because we assumed that this protocol pi does not have any transcript of length more than n minus 1. But actually the transcript could be even shorter than n minus 1. It's at most n minus 1, it could be even shorter. We can just assume without loss of generality that, if the transcript is shorter, that is, they are able to figure out the answer earlier, they will pad out, the protocol pads things out with some junk bits so that every transcript is exactly of the same length. Okay? We can always do that. Imagine that you are given one page to write an answer for some question, and you finish writing the question in half a page. You can fill up the remaining half with something which will be ignored. Okay. So the transcript, let's assume, is n minus 1 bits long. Okay. So now let's look at this table. So in this table, the rows are indexed by the possible inputs that Alice can have. And here I've written only 2 of the inputs that Alice has, x, y. There are many other inputs, but I'm going to focus on just these 2 inputs. Alice could have x, Alex could have y, or Alice could have something else. The columns are focusing on the inputs that Bob has. So Bob could have x, Bob could have y, Bob could have something else. Something else we ignore. In the entries of this table, we are going to put in the transcript which is generated by pi when these are the inputs. So when Alice has x and Bob has x, the transcript is b1 to bn minus 1. When Alice has y and Bob has y, the transcript is b1 to bn minus 1. From this, I would like to say something about the transcript in this position when Alice has x but Bob has y. Can you see what we can conclude? I claim that we can conclude that, in fact, even for this, the transcript must be exactly the same. And the reason why this is so is it basically hinges on what we mean by a protocol. What is the definition of a protocol? So the protocol must specify who speaks first. That does not depend on the inputs, right? The protocol says who speaks first. So let's say the protocol, I don't know anything about the protocol, but it is going to specify either Alice goes first or Bob goes first. Suppose the protocol that we have picked up assumes that Alice speaks first. Well, then the first bit that Alice sends can depend only on her input. It does not depend on Y at all. But now notice that in both these cases, Alice has X. So the first bit she sends here has to be the same as the first bit that she sends here. Okay, but this was only if the protocol said that the first bit is from Alice. What if the protocol said that the first bit is from Bob? Then we do this comparison. Okay? We say, okay, the first bit is from Bob. Well, when Bob had Y, he sent the first bit B1, right? That we know because we looked at a transcript on YY. So now, independent of whether Alice has X or Y, when Bob has Y, the first bit will still have to be B1. So it doesn't matter who is going first in the protocol. If I know that this is B1 to Bn minus 1 and this is B1 to Bn minus 1, then at this position, the first bit must be B1. Okay, that's the first bit. What about the next bit? Now, again, the protocol is going to specify who speaks next. And if you think a little bit more about this is an inductive proof. At every stage of the protocol, the information that the persons have is exactly the same. So if the protocol says that after Alice sends the first bit, if that first bit is B1, then the next bit must come from Alice again. Then, well, the next bit is again going to be B2 because of this comparison. If the protocol says that the next bit is going to come from Bob, then what is Bob's view so far? Bob's view so far is that Bob knows Y and Bob doesn't know X, but Bob knows a little bit about X, which came from B1. B1 was sent by Alice. It had some information about X in it. But in both these cases, because inductively we have said that the first bit is the same. So Bob knows exactly the same thing about X in both cases. So the next bit sent by Bob will have to be the same. So the next bit will again be B2. And then you proceed. So this is induction on the ith bit which is sent in the transcript. Bit by bit, you will compare either against the bit sent by Alice or the bit sent by Bob, and we conclude that this transcript is also the same. But now that tells us that, if the transcript is the same, at the end of the transcript, one of the parties knows the answer. Right? So if at the end of this transcript, Bob is going to announce the answer, well, whatever Bob announced here, Bob has to announce here. So Bob will have to say, yes, they are equal. Or if at the end of this transcript, it is Alice who announces the answer, well, Alice announced yes, equal here. So Alice will have to say yes here also. Basically, it doesn't matter who is announcing the final answer. Pi will have to give the same answer on XX and XY or on XY and YY. So somewhere an error is going to happen. So we did not use any information about what Pi was doing, how it was sending it. All we are saying is that if Pi is a valid protocol specifying exactly who speaks what when, and if it follows those rules, then these transcripts must match up, and therefore Pi cannot be solving the equality problem at all. It must be making errors on some inputs. In fact, if you think about it, look at this entry in the table also. Using exactly the same argument, you can show that here also the transcript will have to be the same. So Pi will have to give the same answer on these two inputs as well. That's another error. And in fact, you'll be able to show that there are many such errors. So just using the fact that the mapping of inputs of the form XX, which are the inputs where the equality function was 1, the mapping of this inputs to transcripts has to be injective. Yes, that's what we're saying. We're saying that if the mapping from the equality inputs, yes inputs to transcripts is not injective, then there is an error. So therefore it must be injective. And if it must be injective, then you must have long enough transcripts. Okay? So that is why you need a transcript of length at least n. You cannot get away with less than n bits. Is this argument clear? Before we move on, this may be a good point to stop. And if there are any questions, then I can take them at this point. Okay, I'm not hearing anything, so let me assume that.
There aren't any questions yet, but I just wanted to remind everyone that you can either post your questions in the chat box on Zoom or on YouTube, and I can relay it to Meena. If there's also something that you want to ask, it's small enough a group that you can unmute yourself and go ahead and ask. So, yeah, back to you, Meena.
Okay, thanks, Varuni. Yeah. Okay, so this was this was a textbook illustration of the kind of argument which we would use in proving a lower bound. You want to show that no matter what protocol is designed, it must require so many bits. This is very different from saying, here is a protocol, analyze it, see how many bits it uses, or here is an algorithm, analyze it, see how much time it takes. You are not given the protocol, you are not given the algorithm, right? So this is a lower bound argument which says that no matter what protocol is given, if it solves this question correctly, then it will require lots of communication. And many lower bound arguments will have this kind of a flavor. They are basically going to use the syntax of the protocol or the algorithm, which is what we used here when we said that all we are using is the fact that it's a valid protocol and that it is a correct protocol. It is claiming to solve this question. Okay, so let's move on. If we want to solve this question, deciding equality, it looks like we need to communicate n bits. What do we allow a margin of error? So we want to solve the same question, but the target audience here is students, right? Every time you solve an assignment or write an exam, you're not always aiming for 100%. If you can prepare well enough and get 95%, perhaps you may be, perhaps you may be satisfied. Yeah, is there a question?
Before you go on, there's one question. I think maybe if you can go over it a little bit again. So can you explain why gx is equal to gy? I think it was your first assumption. Yeah.
Yeah. So this line, right? Yeah. So this line follows from the from what I've written here. G is this function which maps inputs of the form XX, right? To so it's mapping an n-bit string X to the transcript on when Alice has X and Bob also has X. Now, how many strings are there of length n? That is 2 raised to n, right? Because these are binary strings, bit strings. N positions in the string. The first bit can be 0 or 1, second bit can be 0 or 1, and so on. So if you just write out all these bit strings, you will get 2 raised to n bit strings. How many transcripts are there? We have assumed that this protocol pi does not use n bits of communication. That is crucial. This protocol pi, it is solving this problem using less than n bits of communication. So I want to know how many transcripts there are which are of length strictly less than n. The transcript could be of length 0 or 1 or 2 or 3 up to n minus 1. Okay. So of length I, how many transcripts are there? 2 raised to I. So of length up to n minus 1, the number of possible transcripts, not all of them may not even be real transcripts in this protocol, but the number of possible transcripts is upper bounded. It's maximum it can be is all possible transcripts of length 0 plus all possible transcripts of length 1 plus all possible transcripts of length 2 up to n minus 1. So 2 raised to 0 plus 2 raised to 1 plus 2 square plus 2 raised to 3 up to 2 raised to n minus 1. This is the geometric series. You sum it up, you will get 2 raised to n minus 1. Right? For instance, when n is 4, you have 16 bit strings. But if you are allowed only a transcript of length 0 or 1 or 2 or 3, you have only 15 possible transcripts. 16 strings, if you want to map to 15 transcripts, there must be 2 strings which get mapped to the same transcript. That's the pigeonhole principle, and that is what leads us to this conclusion here. If the protocol is not using n bits of communication, then there must be 2 such strings for which the transcripts are the same. And remember that G was the transcript on XX and the transcript on YY. Is that clear now? Okay, I see that there is something coming up in the chat, but I can't see the message in the chat. So I'll just assume that it's okay and proceed, or you can like interrupt and tell me.
Yeah.
Okay, so we went past this. We said that if there are not enough transcripts so that you can assign 1 transcript per input pair XX, then any protocol which does not have enough potential transcripts will make an error. And that error we found by looking at this small table here. So now we want to go beyond this. and say, what if we allow a margin of error? So maybe we are going to randomly do some things and say, okay, sometimes I may make an error, I may give the wrong answer, but most of the time I want my answer to be correct. So then we need to quantify a little bit more clearly, what do we mean by most of the time? What kind of error? Do we mean for most inputs, or do we mean that we will do something randomly and then for every input there is some probability of error? So actually we mean the latter. So what I mean is the following: allow Alice and Bob to randomly decide what bits to send. We build this into the definition of the protocol. So Alice has X, and earlier it was like, looking at X, Alice decides, okay, the first bit I have to send must be something which is a function of X. Now I'm saying that it is not necessarily a function of X alone. It is a function of X and some random bits which are coming from somewhere else. So if they are also allowed to make some random decisions along the way, then what may happen is that on the same input XY, Alice has X and Bob has Y, exactly the same input, but for some random choices they end up saying, okay, the inputs are equal, and for some other random choices they say, oh, the inputs are not equal. Okay, so think of these random choices as coming from a coin toss. Alice is trying to figure out what is the next bit to send. She just fishes out a coin from her pocket and flips it and then decides to send a bit. So today she runs this protocol on the same file and they end up saying, yeah, the files are equal. And tomorrow she runs the same thing. The coin, yesterday it landed heads. Today, I don't know, it may land tails. And then they continue and they decide that the files are not equal. So this is important. We are talking about what happens on the very same input. Okay. So what we would require is that for each possible input, XY, X with Alice and Y with Bob, there is some error probability because there are random choices built into the protocol. There is some error probability. The probability that the protocol concludes X is equal to Y when they are not equal, or that it concludes that X is not equal to Y when actually they are equal. That would be the error probability. What we require is that for every possible input XY, the error probability should be small. Is it even possible to do something like this? So here's a very naive idea. Instead of sending the whole bit string, the whole power of randomness is that you sample at some random points. So Alice is going to randomly pick one position N and she will send that position to Bob saying, hey, I'm not going to send you the whole file. I'm just sending you the ith bit of the file. So she sends I, the value of I, because Bob doesn't know. Alice has been tossing coins and Bob is not seeing what is being tossed. So she sends the value of I. That's going to require roughly log n bits because I is a number from 1 to n. So to represent it in binary as a bit string requires log n bits. Then she sends the ith bit of X. That's just one bit. Okay, so Bob now gets I and gets Xi, the ith bit of X, Xi. So Bob looks up the ith bit of his input, Y. Now, if his input in the ith position is different from what Alice sends, then for sure X is not equal to Y. So Bob announces X is not equal to Y. But if this ith bit matches, Bob declares, oh, X is equal to Y. And this is obviously very naive, right? Because all they have done is they have checked one bit. And that one bit they have chosen at random. So what we want to do is we want to see what is good and what is bad about this naive idea. Well, the good thing is obvious. The amount of communication is much, much less than n. Just log n bits. Now log n plus 1. Log n bits to represent the value of I and one more bit to give the value of X at the ith position. So it's much less communication than what we had earlier. If the two strings X and Y are actually the same, then what is the probability of error? Actually, the probability of error in this case is 0. No matter what Alice picks. Alice picks I, sends Xi. Xi is going to be the same as Yi because X and Y are the same. So there's absolutely no error in this case. What if X is not equal to Y? So if X is not equal to Y, then the probability that the protocol makes an error is exactly the probability that this random position I that Alice picked up was a position where X and Y agreed. Even though X and Y are different, there are some positions on which they may agree. No? For instance, right in the first slide, we saw these huge files, they differed in just 2 bits. There were so many other bits where they agreed. And if Alice had sent one of those other positions, Bob would have been misled into thinking that X is equal to Y. Those are all the errors. So an error happens when a matching position is sent. So in other words, a non-error happens when a mismatched position is sent. So probability of error is 1 minus the probability that in fact a correct answer is given. In fact, the I which is picked by Alice is a position where X and Y are not agreeing. So we want to know what is this probability. 1 minus, what is the probability that I is a position with mismatch? It's the number of mismatches divided by n. Because there are n possible positions. Some of them are mismatches and some are not. And Alice is going to pick one of these positions completely at random. She doesn't know which are the mismatches because she doesn't know Bob's input. So the probability that I is a position with mismatch is just the number of mismatches by n. What do we know about the number of mismatches? All we know is that X is not equal to Y. That means there is at least one place where they differ. Maybe there is just one. We know that it is not 0. The number of mismatches is not 0. It is at least 1. And therefore, because it comes here with a negative sign, we can conclude that this is less than or equal to 1 minus 1 over n. That's not very good. No? That's not a small error. In particular, if my file had 100 bits, both these files were 100 bits long and they differed in only 1 bit, then the probability of error is 99 by 100. 99 positions that Alice picks, Bob will say, yeah, our files are equal. Only in 1 out of 100 chance that they will catch the position where there is an error. So this is not good. This is too much error. Okay. So one obvious fix for this is to say that instead of sending just 1 bit, Alice can pick k bits. No, k may be larger than 1. So Alice picks k bits, k positions, the bits in those positions. She sends them to Bob. She sends those positions and the bits in those positions. So now the communication, for 1 bit you needed log n plus 1. Log n to say what is that position and 1 to say what is the bit at that position. And now she's going to do this k times. So a little bit more maybe. It depends on what value of k. We have to figure out what is a good value of k. What is the error probability? Well, again, remember, all we know is that X and Y are not equal. So this algorithm will, this protocol will correctly detect that X and Y are not equal if at least one of the k positions picked was a mismatched position. Right? So maybe they differed in just one position, X and Y. So if Alice and Bob, if Alice picks all the k positions from the matching positions, then you will not get any error at all. Then you will not find that there is a mismatch. Okay, so all the k bits could still match. You could choose k positions from the matching position. So I think I have written something wrong here. This is n minus 1 choose k is the number of ways in which you can choose matching positions. Okay, and n choose k is the number of ways in which you can choose k positions from this whole thing. The error probability is still quite huge. If you really want the error probability to come down to say 25%, 1 out of 4, you will need k to be roughly n by 4 or 3n by 4. I'm not sure. I think I flipped a 1 here. Okay. So this is too much communication. Either we will still have too much error, k by n, or we will, if we want to really make it small, we will have too much communication. So sending 1 bit or sending 10 bits, sending 100 bits is not going to work unless n is already close to the number of bits that we are sending. So this was a naive idea, which the one good thing about it was that the communication was small. Okay, if k is small. So the main problem when k is small, for instance, when k is 1, the main problem is that the transcript depended on very few bits. And this is not good. If you want to check that the files are equal or no, you should be looking at all the bits. Right? So somehow, even if you're using randomness, you want a transcript which depends on all bits. So here is a slightly less naive idea. Alice has these n bits, and I'm numbering them 0 to n minus 1 instead of 1 to n. It will become clear soon why I'm doing this. Alice has x0 to xn minus 1. Bob has y0 to yn minus 1. Alice sends the sum of these bits mod 2. So she just adds up all her bits. She'll get a number. If that is odd, she sends 1. If that is even, she sends 0. It's just 1 bit that is being sent. But it overcomes one problem that was there in the previous naive protocol, which is that this 1 bit, it depends on every input bit. If you change even one input bit, this value will change. No? odd even will change. The moment you flip a 0 to a 1 or a 1 to a 0 in any of these, the odd even nature will change. So it depends on all the input bits. That was one bottleneck earlier. And the protocol says that Bob is going to again do the same thing. Once Bob gets this indicator from Alice, whether her sum is odd or even, Bob has also computed his sum, y0 plus y1 up to yn minus 1. And if these two values are different, then of course x and y are different. Bob announces that. Otherwise, Bob declares, oh, they must be equal. Okay. Now, you notice that this protocol has not used any randomness. I mean, Alice has just determined this is what is to be sent, and Bob has made it. So there is no randomness used, which means that obviously this protocol cannot be correct. We already saw that without any randomness, you should be communicating n bits. For every input, since there is no randomness, the probability of error is 0 or 1. Now, it cannot be 0 everywhere. We have already seen that n bits of communication is necessary. This is using only 1 bit of communication. So it must be the case that there are inputs for which the probability of error is 1. You can easily think of some such inputs, right? If Alice has 1, 1 followed by all zeros, and Bob has all zeros, Alice's sum is even, Bob's sum is also even, they declare yes. Okay. So this is really bad. We somehow managed to get hold of a input bit of a communication bit which depended on all the input bits, brought down the amount of communication, but then the error just went up through the roof. So anyway, not all is lost. Basically, what are the ideas that we can take away from these two naive algorithms? One is that we want to use randomness. We are trying to see, is it possible to use randomness to bring down communication while still keeping error under control? The first naive idea told us that, we must involve all the bits. If we don't, then we cannot bring down the error. We want to use the randomness and involve all the bits, but we want to generate a short message, compact all the bits into a smaller message. How are we going to do this? We're going to use what's called a polynomial method. What is this polynomial method? Are there any more questions at this point before I continue? No. Okay, if there are, I am assuming that Varuni will interrupt me. Just that I'm seeing some.
There are no other questions. I think it's clear. I think you can.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Okay, so the polynomial method. What is this polynomial method? In this polynomial method, Alice and Bob are going to think of their inputs not as bit strings, but as polynomials. And how are we going to do this? Well, Alice thinks of her bits x0, x1 to xn minus 1 as coefficients of a univariate polynomial. That univariate polynomial is this. A of z, it's x0 plus x1 into z plus x2 into z square, x3 into z cube, xn minus 1 into z raised to n minus 1. So it's a polynomial in the single variable z, and its coefficients are these x0, x1, x2. So all the coefficients are 0 or 1. There are no other coefficients. Okay? So every bit string you can think of as a polynomial like this. It's a polynomial with 0, 1 coefficients. Degree is at most n minus 1. Degree could be even less than n minus 1. For instance, if xn minus 1 is 0, then that degree n minus 1 term is not there. So she thinks of her input as a polynomial. Bob thinks of his input as a polynomial. His polynomial, we call it b. And what they do is the following. Alice picks a t at random from some suitable range. So it doesn't have to be 0 or 1, some number, 10,000, 506, some such number. We'll have to figure out what that range should be. Alice picks a t at random from some suitable range. Because she's picking it at random, Bob doesn't know what that t is. So she has to send t. She tells Bob, hey, this is the t I've picked. And then she sends, instead of sending the whole bit string, which we saw was a costly communication, she sends the value of this polynomial at when the variable z takes the value t. So she sends the value of at. Now once Bob gets t, Bob can also compute b at t. So if a of t and b of t are not the same, then Bob knows that the two strings are different. So Bob announces x is not equal to y. And otherwise Bob declares very optimistically that indeed x and y are the same. Okay? This is a different protocol, right? It's quite different from what we saw earlier. Interpret the inputs as polynomials. Choose a random point at which to evaluate the polynomial and compare whether at this randomly chosen point the evaluations match. How good or bad is this protocol? If x is equal to y, then no matter what t you choose, no matter from which range, remember we haven't even specified from which range we will choose t, but no matter what range we pick, at and bt will always agree because they are the same polynomial. So there is no error. This is what we have been seeing earlier also. If x is not equal to y, Bob may end up declaring x is equal to y. When will this happen? This will happen only if t is a root of a minus b, right? A of t should be equal to b of t. That means if I take the polynomial a minus b at t should be 0. So Bob may end up giving the wrong answer only if the random t that Alice chose happened to be a root of this polynomial a minus b. But remember, the polynomial a minus b has degree only n minus 1 or maybe even less. So a degree n minus 1 polynomial can have at most n minus 1 roots. It cannot have more than those many roots. What Alice will do is to choose t from a range of size n square. So she will choose a t completely at random, let's say 0, 1, 2, up to n square. Then what is the probability of error? The probability that Bob gives a wrong answer is the probability that t is actually a root of this polynomial. Because if t is not a root, then Bob says, yes, x and y are different. So the probability of error is the probability that t is a root, which is number of roots divided by the size of the range. Number of roots is at most n minus 1. The size of the range is n square. So this is at most 1 over n. This is excellent. If we are trying to compare files which are 1000 bits long, this is like 1 by 1000, 0.1%. So the error probability has really come down. But is that enough? Has the communication come down? Well, actually, the communication we are doing pretty badly. Huh? For instance, for the error probability to come down, I need a range to be much larger than n, right? So we chose a range of size n square. So in particular, Alice could have chosen t to be n. Now, if Alice chooses t to be n, how large can at be? There is a degree n minus 1 term, right? So there could be an n to the n minus 1. So Alice has to send the value of at also, not just t. She has to send at. So at is this very big number. This big number, I have to write it as a bit string in binary, right? So this larger number, when I write in binary, it's going to require even more than n bits to represent. It's going to require something like n log n bits to represent. That is even worse than the first completely simple naive protocol which we saw, which used no randomness and made no error. Okay? So here we are using much more bits than that, and still we may occasionally make an error. What's the use? Okay, so it looks like this is useless, but actually this has a very interesting idea which we can now tweak. Polynomial methods was the first idea. The second idea is finite fields. Okay. Fix a prime p which is sufficiently large, but not too large. So remember, we needed a range to be large. We said, t should be roughly n square. So now I'll choose a prime p which is even more than n square, but it's not too large. It's not more than 2n square. Such a prime always exists. You know about the density of primes. There are lots of primes between every n and 2n. There are, in fact, there's not just one. There are many. We'll pick any one. Okay. Now what Alice does is somewhat similar to what she did earlier. So the range is now going to be 0 to p minus 1. Okay. Earlier we said the range can be 0 to n square. Now it's going to be 0 to p minus 1. So Alice picks a t in that range and sends it to Bob. She also sends at, but instead of sending the true value of at, she sends the value of at modulo p, the remainder when at is divided by p. This brings down the communication, no? Because the remainder when it is divided by p cannot be a number as large as n to the n minus 1, or no, the remainder can be at most p minus 1. So she's sending a number of that size. Now, if this is not the same as what Bob calculates on the same t, no? Bob gets t from Alice, evaluates his polynomial at t, looks at the remainder mod p. If the two remainders are different, Bob knows x is not equal to y and announces that. And otherwise, Bob declares x is equal to y. We need to analyze this protocol. What can we say about this protocol? If x is equal to y, again, there is no error. If x is equal to y, the polynomials are the same. You evaluate them anywhere, the values are the same. The values mod p are also the same. If x is not equal to y, when will the protocol make an error? It will make an error only when a and t, the two polynomials, a and b, the polynomials that Alice and Bob have, they don't have to evaluate to the same value on t. They have to evaluate on t, they have to evaluate to values which are the same modulo p. So in over ZP, these two values must be the same. So there will be an error if and only if P divides the value of the polynomial A minus B at the evaluation point T. So if we view A, B, A minus B, all of these as univariate polynomials in this polynomial ring. So I'm fixing my field to be the finite field of characteristic P and of size P. Okay. Yeah, and A, B, A minus B are univariate polynomials in this field. When will the protocol give an erroneous answer? If and only if T is a root of this polynomial. And now we can again use the same idea. The number of roots is at most the degree of this polynomial, which is strictly less than n. But the number of choices for T is at least n square, because we chose a prime P which was more than n square. So the probability of error is 1 by n, as it was in the previous case. Communication, the amount of communication has dropped. Right? To send T, I require log P bits. To send AT also, I require only log P bits, not this log of n to the n minus 1. And remember that P was something between n square and 2n square. So we said P should be sufficiently large so that this error is small. And now this is why I said it should not be too large. I don't want to go beyond 2n square. So if I don't go beyond 2n square, then to represent a number in the range 0 to P minus 1, I require only roughly 2 log n bits, 2 log n plus 1 maybe. Okay. So the number of bits communicated is 2 log n plus 1 bits to communicate T, 2 log n plus 1 bits to communicate A of T, 4 log n bits. So this is the new protocol. It communicates only order log n bits, order approx. So if you don't worry too much about the constants, here I have a constant 4, maybe there's a 4 log n plus 4. So let's say 5 log n. Okay. This protocol communicates some constant into log n bits, but the probability of error is really minuscule for every input. For some input pairs, the probability of error is 0. It will always give the correct answer. And for some inputs, there is some probability of error, but it is very small. It is 1 by n. But once n becomes large enough, this is sufficiently small. So this is a fantastic algorithm, and this is why protocol. This is why in the beginning I said, look at those 4 choices and keep your votes in mind. And what is the right answer? It depends. So we saw that n plus 1 n bits is necessary if you want to get the answer right always. But if you are okay with a 0.01% probability of error, then you can do much better than n. You can get away with log n bits of communication. And as a small aside, here is another way to use polynomials. This protocol which we saw, it viewed x and y as coefficients of polynomials in the field FP. And it communicated the evaluation of those polynomials at some randomly chosen point. Another thing that we could have done was to view x, y as evaluations of polynomials. Then these will be different polynomials. So Alice has this x0 to xn minus 1 and says, okay, imagine a degree n minus 1 polynomial capital A, which I don't even know what it is, but this is a polynomial which on input 0 evaluates to x0, on input 1 it evaluates to x1, on input 2 it evaluates to x2, and so on. Think of the bits of x and y as evaluations of the polynomials. And again, communicate the evaluation at a randomly chosen point. This is another way in which you can use polynomials in this protocol, and exactly the same thing will work as before. Whether you think of your bit strings as coefficients or evaluations does not matter. The amount of communication, the amount of error will be exactly the same as before. And this is something that I won't work out here, but if you are sufficiently intrigued and have been following up to this point, then after the talk is over, I would suggest that you actually try and verify this fact. Okay, good. So we started out with n bits necessary. We have come down to log n, 4 log n, 5 log n bits may be sufficient if you have a small probability of error. Now we should have reached the limit. So let's see what more can we do. Okay. So here is yet another aspect to this. What if the randomness is public? And this is not clear. Does this even make sense? So let me think about the previous protocol. Alice chose a random T, and maybe the way she chose T was by flipping some coins from her pocket. But it's not that the T was secret, because she chose it and then she immediately sent it to Bob, right? She has to send it to Bob, otherwise Bob doesn't know where to evaluate his polynomial. So the idea was not to do things secretly. The idea was just that, her randomness, Bob has to see. Now, what if instead of her flipping coins and sending the outcome to Bob, what if they source randomness from the publicly visible world? Does this even make sense? Some of you may have read some crime teenage crime and teenage detective stories from maybe 50, 100 years ago, where this would be one of the favorite tricks that two parties trying to communicate to each other, they will have this protocol fixed in mind. Open the Sunday Herald, whatever, some newspaper, open the classifieds page, take the 5th advertisement and take the 6th letter of that advertisement and use that as a random bit. It's not completely random, but it's reasonably random. Okay, so they may have agreed on this, that we will use that as a basis point on which to then carry on and do further calculations. Now that would be an example of what I mean randomness from the publicly visible world. So Alice is not going to flip coins and then send the outcome to Bob. Bob is not going to flip coins and send the outcome to Alice. They are far apart, but maybe there is some place where there is a bit stream which is reasonably random, which they can both see without too much cost. Remember, the communication between Alice and Bob is very costly, but maybe the cost of reading these random bits is very little. So we will even make this simplifying assumption that the cost of reading this public randomness is zero. It's free. Reading this public randomness is for free. Okay. So let's assume this. They don't have to source, they don't have to send each other outcomes of random bits. They can source randomness from the publicly visible world. Because it is publicly visible, they will be sourcing the same randomness. If Alice chooses a random T based on what is she seeing in the newspaper, Bob is seeing the same newspaper. He gets the same value of T. Okay. Does this make any difference at all? Should it make any difference? So if you analyze the previous protocol, in the previous protocol, there was this random choice T, which Alice had to send to Bob. That required sending login bits. And then once the randomness was known, AT mod P also had to be sent. That also required login bits. So even if the random bits are visible to both players, you still have to send login bits. You don't have to send T anymore, but you still have to send AT. No? So you're not saving anything on communication. So what we want to ask is, can we somehow exploit this public randomness to do even better than login? Maybe login by login, maybe login, something like that. Exploit the fact that randomness is visible. So then obviously we have to change the protocol. The previous protocol will still require login because AT has to be sent. So we want to do something completely different. At this point, revisit your vote. Do you think we can do something better at all? How much better? Okay. And let me in the next few minutes give you one answer to this. And the answer to this is going to come from what we call random subset sums. So you have this bit string x1 to xn. Now I've gone from 0 to n-1 to 1 to n. It's more convenient this way. So let's fix any x of this form, x1 to xn. Any x as long as it is not all zeros. That's important. Okay. Fix any x which is not all zeros. Pick an r also of the same length, a random string r of length n, but it become completely at random. Okay. And now I want to know, what can I say about this quantity? R1 x1 plus R2 x2 plus blah 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 plus Rn xn mod 2. So I look at this inner product of R and x and I want to know, is that odd or is that even? How often will it be odd? How often will it be even? How does it depend on x? So that is why I very specifically said here that x should not be all zeros, because if x is all zeros, then this will always be 0. But the interesting thing is that if x is non-zero, then it doesn't matter what x is. Half the times this sum will be odd and half the times this sum will be even. So from this x, I have taken this long n-bit random string and I've produced one pure random bit. No, probability half of it being odd, probability half of it being even. Can you see why this is the case? Why it's exactly half? Let me quickly show you a sketch, but if you would like to think about it later offline, you can skip the next 1 minute while I just go over this. Okay. So I'm trying to explain here why this probability is exactly half. Okay. So fix any I in n for which xi is not 0, xi is 1. We know that such an I exists because we started off saying that x is not all zeros. So I fixed this one I where xi is 1. Now I'm going to pair up all these potential random strings. For each r in 0, 1 to the n, I'm going to define an r prime, and this r prime is the same as r at every position except the ith position. At all j which is not equal to I, Rj prime and Rj are the same. At ith position, it is exactly the opposite. If Ri is 1, then Ri prime is 0. If Ri is 0, Ri prime is 1. And now if you look at this inner product Rx, modulo 2. So Rx I can write as summation Rj, Xj, j not equal to I, plus the contribution from Xi. And now I add two more dead terms to this. I have Ri, Xi, and I have added Xi and Xi. If I add Xi twice, the answer does not change mod 2, right? Because I'm adding either 0 or I'm adding 2. So mod 2, this is still an equality. Okay? And now this Ri plus 1 is exactly the same as Ri prime mod 2. So up to here, this much part is R prime X. And this last Xi is 1. So I've got R prime X plus 1. That means if Rx is odd, R prime X is even. If Rx is even, R prime X is odd. What have I done? I've taken all the random strings and paired them up perfectly. Okay, and I put all the ones which yield Rx odd on one side. Each one of them has a matching R prime where R prime X is even. So half the random strings are giving Rx is odd and the other half are giving Rx is even. Okay. Yeah, like I said, if you would like to, you can go over this analysis later and think about it. Right now, this is the important fact we want to use. If X is not an all zero string, half the random strings will map it to a 0 and half of them will map it to a 1. And how do we use this? Here's a protocol. Alice and Bob use public randomness. So they don't have to communicate the randomness. Publicly looking up some newspaper, some stock market numbers or whatever, they source a random string R of length n. Alice sends Bob the value of Rx mod 2. And Bob also is seeing R, so Bob is also computing Ry mod 2. If these two values are different, then Bob knows X is not equal to Y, announces that. And otherwise, Bob declares X is equal to Y. Communication, 1 bit. Alice sent just 1 bit to Bob. Analysis, error analysis. Well, if X is equal to Y, again, there is no error because Rx and Ry are the same. But if X is not equal to Y, then the probability that Bob gives the wrong answer is the probability that you picked an R at which R into the string X plus Y or X minus Y, because mod 2 X plus Y and X minus Y are the same. This string R into X plus Y misleadingly gave a 0. Okay, which is why Bob thought that, oh, they are the same value. So R should be one of these things which misleadingly gives a 0. But we saw that for every R which misleadingly gives a 0, there is another R which gives a 1. So half the R's will satisfy this. So the probability of error is half. That's not good news. Huh? Probability of error is half. Why do you need to communicate anything? Without doing any communication, Bob can toss a coin and say, okay, this is the answer. With probability half, it will be right. But we can use this a little bit nicely. We can say that look at this public randomness, and instead of sourcing one random string, let me source k random strings, each of length n. These are all independent. And what Alice is going to do is to send R1x mod 2, R2x mod 2, R3x mod 2, up to RKX mod 2. So Alice is going to send k bits. Bob is going to check each of these k bits against the corresponding RLY mod 2. If at even one point they differ, then of course X and Y have to be different. And Bob announces that they are different. If they match everywhere, Bob declares that X is equal to Y. We again have to do the same error analysis. Now we can do this faster. If X is equal to Y, there is no error. If X is not equal to Y, when will Bob be misled into giving the wrong answer? So the wrong answer meaning when will Bob be misled into saying that actually X and Y are equal? Each of these K trials, the first, second, third, up to K, all R1 to RK, all of them led Bob to say, oh, X and Y are the same. Not just one or two, all of them. No? If even one of them differed, then Bob would have said they are different. So all of them led Bob to the wrong answer. But remember, all of them are independent. Okay, so I can write this probability as the product of the individual probabilities, that is 1 over 2 to the K. That means now the error probability has come down significantly. Okay, so even if K is as small as 10, the probability of error is 1 over 2 to the 10, that is 0.001, that is 0.1%. Okay, so with just 10 bits of communication, I can get down to 0.1% error probability, even if n is 1,000, 1 million, 1 billion, 1 trillion. This does not depend on n at all. This is very, very important. Okay, so it doesn't matter how large these files are that you are comparing. I can get away with an error of 0.1% by communicating 10 bits. I can get away with an error of 25% by communicating 2 bits, half square. So this is the interesting thing that I wanted to mention. The correct answer depends on your model, on what you are willing to take away. So here's a quick wrap up. For equality, we saw various bounds. Let's just recap what we saw. If no randomness is used, the protocol is deterministic. Then we saw that, well, if it's deterministic, but we want zero error, then you need n bits of communication. If there is private randomness, Alice is privately flipping coins and then she has to send it across. We still saw an algorithm which required 4 log n plus 4, a protocol which required only that much of communication, and it brought down the error quite a bit, 1 by n. So when n is 1 million, this is like a negligible error, and it required only 6 log n bits of communication. With public randomness, we have this whole range. With 2 bits, you can get down to 25%. With 10 bits, we saw 0.1%. In general, if you have k bits, then the error is 2 raised to minus k. But maybe we should be asking a different question. If I want error to be not more than epsilon, how much communication do I need? Well, then you just need to say that, 2 raised to minus k has to be less than or equal to epsilon. And it turns out that log 1 over epsilon bits of communication is enough, independent of the size of the file. That is the important thing. So we have a whole lot of very different answers to this question of how equality behaves. And I think I'm already out of time, so I will stop now. I had another 2-3 slides about a few different methods and the general setting. So maybe I will just show this general setting, not the other slide. The general setting is that it need not be equality. I could have some function of 2 input strings. Alice has x, Bob has y. They want to communicate, they want to compute the function fxy using as little communication as possible. And the goal is to understand how much communication would be required in the deterministic case, in the randomized case with private randomness, in the case with public randomness. And this is exactly the research area called communication complexity. Some very nice results are known in this area. And here are 2 reference books which I would leave you with if you would like to take a look at them. Okay, so let me stop here. Thank you for your attention. I'm open to taking questions.
Thanks, Meena. That was interesting. So I think there are no more questions in the chat box, but I think at this stage, people can just unmute and ask questions. I think that's the easiest thing to do.
Hello, ma'am.
Yeah.
Ma'am, what I was thinking that if we are assuming that Alice and Bob has 2 n-bit string, then we can set a protocol that each of them will start writing will start writing 1, 2, 3 natural numbers. Will label all these strings. Suppose we have 1, 0, 1, 1, 0, 1 like this. So we'll start from right to left and we'll write 1, 2, 3 to n. And we'll first check that which of the numbers are less. I mean, 1 are less or zeros are less.
So that is like saying add up the bits and look at how many ones you have. Okay.
No, ma'am. We just add all the numbers which we have labeled, like 1, 2, 3. Suppose we have 0. I have assigned 2 to 0. So we'll not add 2. We'll add 3. And suppose similarly we have assigned 5 to 0. So we'll not add that 5.
Okay. So you add up the positions where you have a 1. Not
yes.
the, yeah. Okay.
So that way we can say that if the sum both of them are getting are equal, then we can say that. But here we have some error that it might be possible that suppose we are getting sum as 27. So 27 might be represented as something else. Sum of 2. We can write in 2 different ways.
Yeah. No, so Alice may have got 27 because she had only 1 1 at position 27, whereas Bob had 2 1s at position 13 and position 14, right? Something like that you're saying.
Yes, ma'am. So to reduce that, what we can do is we will confirm first that both of them are adding same number of terms.
How will you confirm this?
Just by sending like we were communicating before.
So they will first tell each other how many terms they have that are 1.
Yes, that how many terms, either 1 or 0. Suppose I have a a string of length 1000,
Hmm.
and there are suppose 400 zeros and 600 ones.
Hmm.
So my preference will be to add all the positions of zeros.
Okay.
And if we are sure that they have same number of items they are adding, then we can reduce the error that we were getting
No,
in the
so to be sure that we are adding the same number, so what will happen is you will have to tell the other party, I am adding zeros, not ones. So that is one bit. And you will have to say, I have 400 zeros.
We'll make sure that we will add whatever we have in less quantities.
Yes, yes. So whatever you are adding, you have to tell the other person what you are adding, right?
Yes.
Yes. So now let's say it's a 1000-bit thing and there are 500 ones and 500 zeros. So I decide to add the zeros and I tell the other person the number is 500 and I'm adding the zeros. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So now the value that you send, how many bits will it require? When you add up these 500 positions, you will end up again sending something like n bits. Or will it be much less?
Will be less.
It will be much less. Okay, good. If you add up 500 positions, if you add up all the positions up to n, then that sum is going to be something like n square, and to represent it, you will require roughly log n bits. So you're sending only log n bits. Okay, and now there is still some chance of error because the 500, your 500 are coming from a different place from somebody else's 500. So how do you tackle that?
That part I was.
So the thing is, I may have ones at position 1 and 4 and you have ones at position 2 and 3 and the sums are exactly the same.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So the thing is, if you don't use randomness, you can refine this protocol further and further until it is always correct and until it gets the correct answer, and it will end up requiring at least n bits because we have a lower bound which says that n bits is required. So if you proceed in this way, in fact, my suspicion is that you will be able to prune this down and you may end up getting a protocol which uses n log n bits of communication, which may be even worse.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So it can, I mean, it is a natural idea to try. Unfortunately, it does not give anything better than what we already are able to achieve. Yes. So it is. I would say that. I mean, I heard you saying that maybe we can try and reduce the error. I would not even use the word error in this context because error will come in only if there is randomness. Right? The probability of error comes in if you are using randomness. Whereas here, what you are describing is a very deterministic protocol, which says what is to be sent when.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Yeah. So many such ideas people have played around with. And for the equality function is a particularly nasty function where if you want the correct answer always you have to send n bits, but there are other functions for which the tricks like this actually do work. So.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Yeah.
We have time for maybe one more quick question in the public session. Any other questions? Okay, so if there are no other questions right now, we'll sort of close. So first of all, thanks Meena for this talk, and hopefully all the bits got transferred properly to all of us. So I'd also like to thank so today's the last day of Facets. So I'd like to also thank the other speakers. So Amri, Dheeraj, Anirban as well. And also the moderators. So we had Soumya, who's a postdoc at IMSC, and Mani, who works with the outreach division at IMSC, who are moderating. And of course, the IMSC media team and Gayatri, who's been working very hard to get all these streaming things down and having hosts and co-hosts. And so thanks to Gayatri also. Big thanks to her. And also, of course, all of you, I think a lot of the audience has been showing up almost every day. It's a small audience, smaller than we usually have. We normally have about 120 in a big auditorium. But this is sort of nice because I think you guys have been also helping with questions and stopping things along the way. So the last thing I wanted to mention is that these videos are all going to be edited properly and put up online on our YouTube channel. So you should be able to send it to your friends soon. And the Max Science YouTube channel actually has a lot of other videos from previous years, from previous facets. So you can take a look at those also. And hopefully next year we can have at least some of you back to have a live session. So yeah, but so thanks everyone.